It's a cloud. Perfect. All right. So welcome everybody. Let's see. I hope y'all can see my screen. If not, please let me know. Um, but this is going to be an introduction to Shotgrid slash Shotgun slash Flow Production Tracker. Autodesk does not know what to call this program. So if you've heard any of those names before, it's all the same thing. I think most recently it's Flow Production Tracker. So that's what they're rocking with nowadays. But so, if you want to use Flow for your capstone but don't know where to start, you're like, what the heck even is it? Well, let's start there, right? So it was previously called Studio, then Shot Grid, which is what it was called when I first started my capstone, and then it shifted into Flow Production Tracking. It's an Autodesk software, tracking software, that streamlines and organizes workflows for studios and creative businesses around the world. And SCAD is one of the only schools in the world that uses this industry standard program in its curriculum. So it's really cool the fact that you have access to it, because it's really uncommon, actually, the fact that SCAD has it. So I highly recommend, like, if you're scared of ShotGrid or Flow, if you're scared of Flow, because it seems intimidating or hard to learn, or if your crew is kind of hesitant about using it, I would recommend at least giving it a really good stab at it, at learning how to use it, because this is one of the few chances where you can in learning how to do it, which is really cool. And I'll send the link out to this presentation as well after the fact, but there's a link on here to they still have the link to the website as being labeled as ShotGrid, I'm pretty sure, which is kind of funny. But there's a link to their website on here, as well as ShotGrid, Flow Production Tracker studio videos as well, a link to that. But the ones online, upon first search, you might find that it's kind of hard to find good resources on how to use ShotGrid. There's not really a lot of, even from Autodesk themselves, they don't really have a lot of information out there for you to get started with that, which is kind of weird. You would think they would give more, but that's why we're here today. I'm gonna teach y'all what I know and what we've gathered from over the years. So what does it do? It organizes assets with progress tracking attached to it. It organizes shots with progress tracking as well. It delegates assignments to different members of your team, and it organizes notes and revisions for any shot or asset that you might do drawovers or attach notes to. And it tracks schedules and deadlines, primarily with waterfall Gantt chart type dealios. And I'll show you what I mean in a few. So how do you get an account? Well, Warman gives you an account when you are assigned to a capstone. So you should already have access to ShotGrid slash Flow Production Tracker. If you don't, I would work with your capstone professor on that, because that's something you need permission through Warman to get access to. And that involves working with your professor there. But you get an Autodesk account free through SCAD. So essentially, as a producer, you should have a little bit of extra permissions attached to your account that gives you the ability to, yeah, the manager role is what it's called on the back end. And that helps you edit your project, and also I believe it's your professor who adds it's your professor who adds crew members individually to your project. But like as a manager role, you get a few extra permissions on the back end to change things around. Um students, yeah, students do not have the ability to do any of the above. And the last point mostly is for when we're talking about during summer, but now is the time to start setting up your ShotGrid slash Flow Production Tracker. If I call it ShotGrid, I'm sorry, that's just what I'm used to calling it. But now is the time to start setting that up as much as possible for your capstone. The earlier and the more thoroughly you can set up your ShotGrid, the further down the line your success, like the more successful further down the line you'll be, essentially. That's what I was trying to say there. And before we get really into the weeds, there's some terminology that is helpful to know as well going into what Autodesk calls certain things. So a task in ShotGrid is an assignment, pretty much. That's what that means. And a version is are iterations of your work that you upload to a task. And this will be explained more as I get into the weeds of how ShotGrid works. Um, but a version you've all, I'm sure we've all named things like V1, V2, V3. Essentially, that's what that's referring to. And then a link is a way to connect different elements within ShotGrid, i.e., linking a person to a task. And this will make sense, like I said, the more we get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is upstream and downstream dependencies. And this is terminology that ShotGrid uses to describe what tasks need to be done in what order, so that it can automatically set up Gantt charts for you. And again, all will be explained as we go. But an upstream dependency is a task that needs to be completed before another one can get started. So say you're doing a background. Well, super obviously, there's a lot of steps that need to be done before a background does. For example, like a storyboard. So a storyboard would be an upstream dependency to a background. And then downstream dependencies are tasks that rely on another task being completed before it can get started. So, for example, a downstream dependency of a background would be compositing. Like you have to have your background done before you can start compositing, that kind of thing. So linking upstream and downstream dependencies to a task allows ShotGrid to automatically fill the schedule Gantt chart. Again, I'll show that in a second. But it's really cool how it automatically sets things up for you if you fill in those upstream and downstream dependencies. And listing the duration of each task will also allow ShotGrid to automatically fill the schedule Gantt chart. So for each task that you make, for example, all of these right here, if you set the duration like for, a background takes about 5 days to do in full, for example, that helps ShotGrid guesstimate, okay, well, if a background takes 5 days, how much time does it how much time does your crew need to do things further down the line and further up the line to get a full picture of what a schedule of a production looks like? And now we're going to take a more thorough tour of ShotGrid's layout. So this top bar that you see when you first open the program is called the master menu bar, and that's how you navigate the entirety of ShotGrid across a multitude of different projects if you happen to be in multiple ShotGrids. Um, it also shows you different things like your inbox, my tasks, media, etc. But the first thing you see when you get to that master menu bar is the inbox. And your inbox works like an email would. It leaves you notifications for messages and tasks that your name is linked to within that project. And if you've been assigned to review a task, you'll be notified if an artist uploads a new version. So yeah, inbox is pretty much just like email in terms of notifying you if you've been assigned something new or if your assignment has changed. It'll show up there as a notification. And then in my tasks, so this is where artists can view all of the tasks that you've assigned them as a producer or yourself, uh, since capstones are so small, you're going to be working on other stuff as well as producing. So everything that you and everyone else has been assigned on the project is going to show up here as well. It also is a way for artists to upload their work directly to a task they've been assigned. And that's what shows up when you right click a task under my task and go to new version. Because in Flow Production Tracker, new version is your way of uploading work to a certain task. That's what it calls that. Um, and then media is essentially like you won't be looking at media too often, honestly, because it's like an extreme bird's eye view of absolutely everything within your project. It's not super helpful because it's just such a wide umbrella that it's like, almost useless to look at. But if you're ever curious about taking a cursory glance at your project, that's a way of doing that. Um, and then in terms of the projects button, of course, that goes to show how many shot grids you're in. Um, Granted, if you this is the first time you're using ShotGrid, it's it's only ever going to show your one that you're in. So if you're in multiple shot grids, that would be useful for you to be able to scroll through and see which one to pick for you. But most likely, it's just going to list the one. And then the people are, of course, the artists on your project. Now, ShotGrid is only for current SCAD students who are also purposefully given permissions to join your project. So this is going to list all of those people. And for y'all this year, it's like 20 people to a project. So it should list all your folks in there, and if it doesn't, definitely work with your professor to see what's up with that. But yeah, again, a very cursory glance at who all's on your project. And then below the master menu bar is the project menu bar. This will be a lot more relevant to the day-to-day of your film and setting up the pipeline. Um, so you can actually customize this bar, and it's super helpful to do that depending on the needs of your production. So you can do that by editing the entity bricks of the back end of your shot grid. And again, we will get to that point when we get there, all in due time. But please make sure to explain to your crew how you plan on them using each tab so that they don't upload to the wrong location or mess with any customization. As I'm sure you are all aware, ShotGrid has a very steep learning curve, like straight up. It's just not user friendly. But when you get the hang of it, it's extremely flexible in what all it can allow you to do, which is what's really cool about it and what's very useful about it and why it's industry standard. But just make sure that at some point you sit down with your crew and explain how to use ShotGrid because it's scary to everybody. So just make sure, like, you explain to them how each tab should be used so that they know what is where. Um, some common entity bricks that we recommend you keep for your project. Again, every project's different, so if you don't want to keep them, you absolutely don't have to. But these are the most useful. There's a schedule tab that is going to be where you can see the overall view of how long everything on your production is going to take and the current status of where everything is within your schedule. Your assets tab is going to be all of the assets you're uploading to ShotGrid. Sequences are the way that you set up your sequences for your film. And typically sequences, it just is like, it means the same thing as a scene. That's what that's in reference to. And then shots are just individual shots. Um, Sequences can be broken up however you and your story folks see it makes the most sense. Like whatever you deem as a scene in y'all's eyes, that's how I would recommend y'all splitting up your sequences. And then review is an overall view of what's happening with your project. And then crew, of course, is who's on your crew. So in overview, this is the default homepage when you first open up ShotGrid. This is the tab that it's going to default to going to. Um, this can be changed, however, on the back end, you can change this. It lists all of the project's most recent activity in like it's a social media timeline. So as your crew is uploading assets, it's gonna start showing up there as like a general place to see what all's being uploaded in real time. Um, but please don't upload work here. Um, it doesn't link to a task, so your work will get lost once other versions and notes are uploaded. So like if you upload work to the overview tab, it's essentially like throwing your work into a void and not being able to uh see it in reference to what the work was for. So like if you're doing a character design for a character, and you upload it to overview, it's going to get lost in the pile of assets as opposed to uploading your character design to the asset, like the task assigned to your character to where you can just click your character's name and it pop up. Um, it's a lot easier to keep things organized that way. Um, but yeah, if you're ever curious to see like what folks have been uploading most recently, it's kind of cool to scroll through for sure. Um, you can also customize the banner and profile picture. Y'all probably have at this point, but like in case you didn't know, you can customize it to look cool and themed to your project. Um, and then for the schedule tab, it lists every task created in the project and task again meeting whatever you are doing. So like task being a character, task being an asset, task being an environment. Um, and you can categorize them as well. But again, all in due time, there will be more explanations later. The tasks in green are the ones ahead of schedule, and the tasks in red are behind schedule, according to what you have told ShotGrid is complete and what's not complete. Um, it also lists who is assigned to which task, and it displays every task start date and end date in a Gantt chart. And here's where we finally see this is what a Gantt chart is. It's essentially uh, a list of a bunch of cascading bars, but each bar is a duration of time. And it's the duration of time that you tell ShotGrid something needs in order to be done. Um, so just to kind of overview this one screenshot. So everything in this column furthest to the left is the task. And then right next to it is the category for the task. So there's some storyboards in here, there's some environments, some prop designs, some model sheets. And these bars over here are directly correlated to what what each task is and how long it will take to get done. So like for example, this character design is behind schedule and it was supposed to take from September 11th through September maybe 14th, 15th it looks like. Not quite until the 16th. Ooh, there is. Thank you for messaging that. There we go. All right, we've got more people. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. But this Gantt chart is essentially a helpful way. Hi, new folks. Also, if anyone ever has any questions, please let me know. I will be taking a break in a minute.
By the way, who's watching the
Does
right
someone have a question? Okay, cool. I'm gonna keep going. But I'll take a breather in a minute because I know this is like a lot of information heavy stuff. And for new folks who just joined, I'm so sorry if you've been waiting, but also I've recorded the whole thing thus far as well. Um, so right now we're talking about schedules in ShotGrid, um, which let's see. But yes, so each task is on the far left side of the schedule tab. The category is next to that, and then the Gantt chart over here fills in automatically depending on how long you tell ShotGrid it takes to complete that asset. Um, so like I was saying, character design goes from September 11th to like September 14th, 15th. So it looks like roughly from where it is up top. And it's behind schedule because this blue bar right here is where you are currently, and you have not marked it off as being complete. And that is this status column right here, is what that is referring to. Okay, now moving on to the assets tab. This is best used for the um, pre-production phase, honestly. And it categorizes assets by characters, environment, props, etc. Like I've been referring to for the past few minutes. Assets linked to tasks for different steps of the pre-production pipeline, i.e., concept art, model, UV texture, etc. So each step that you need to complete in your process is going to be a task and it'll categorize itself in ShotGrid. So all of your characters, you can upload the work that that takes to go into that character underneath that task. So like for example, snacks right here. That was character and hex limit. Snacks needed character iterations, a final character design, a turnaround, some expressions because it was a yeah, some expressions for the riggers to know how flexible the rig needs to be. Um, Perhaps also some texture explorations, that kind of thing. All of those types of things would be under that one task, so it's super easy to find and convenient for you. And then sequences, like I was saying earlier, a sequence is a scene, and a scene is a selection of the story that belongs together, usually broken up by a location. But it also can be what logically makes sense to you and your story peeps. Um, Sequences link to multiple shots. It's a category of shots. And it's also the easiest way to get to a shot. Funny enough, you would think it would be through the shots tab, but it is it is actually a little bit easier to get into it through the sequences tab, especially if you're thinking in terms of story, like going to dig for a shot. Um, and then yes, making a proof of concept sequence, it's super helpful for when you're making your proof this quarter, just making that as a separate thing, especially if your story is undergoing a lot of revisions and a lot of changes, just making a separate sequence to keep proof stuff in. It's really helpful categorization wise, to do it that way. And then after you've nailed down your storyboards, going in and making like sequence 1, 2, 3 for the final film. Okay. And then moving on to the shots tab of the project menu bar. So this links to every shot in your project, like every single one. It's not categorized in any way. They're just listed out in sequential order. Um, this link, let's see, link to task for different steps, yeah, of the production pipeline. Um, so, whatever tasks need to go towards that one shot, they're all under that location. But you can also change the thumbnail on each shot to visually differentiate which one is which. I recommend making it a screenshot of your storyboard for that shot that like will most easily visually connect you to what that shot is. So when you've nailed down your boards, making each of these thumbnails a storyboard, the most recognizable storyboard for what that shot is, that's what I would recommend doing when y'all get a little bit deeper into the weeds of story and like kicking into production more with each of your shots. And then this is going to be the most day-to-day tab that y'all will use for Capstone when you do dailies. It's the review tab. This is where you can make what's called a playlist um for your dailies that you present to your professor in your class um for any work you've done since the previous class. Um so all you do is hit add playlist and link the most recent versions of what what people have uploaded to ShotGrid into one place. It's a way to combine all of the most recent work into one big like collection so it's easy to view everything. Um and you can also change the thumbnail of each playlist. When I was on Ultramarine, I just did memes all the time. I guess it depends on the vibe of like your professor and your crew or how much of crunch time it is. But doing it something funny, I feel keeps the mood and the energy up of your production. But it's totally up to what you and your director want to do. But it also helps to differentiate between each day. Um, and I also recommend naming it the date for dailies because things can get really messy really fast with the amount of playlists you'll be making for dailies to view things. And linking a version to the playlist, essentially linking all of the most recent assets that people have uploaded for the class you're presenting for to that one playlist. It's in a little bit of a funky little spot, but this is the exact way to do it. When you're inside of the playlist you made for that day, you go to link versions to this playlist, and then you have to like this is the window that pops up right here when you hit that button. But in order to um be able to select the correct assets that you want for the day, Um, I recommend hitting this button and going to the playlist option on that. And what that will do is it will show you which playlists are associated with which assets. So like if for example, if someone already uploaded um a certain shot to the shot grid already and we looked at it last class, but you want the most updated shot for this class, it'll tell you, hey, this asset was already uploaded to this playlist. And you could be like, oh, great. Now I know which asset hasn't been uploaded to any playlist and I can add it to the one for this class so that we're looking at the most recent version, if that makes sense. Um, so, like, hitting this button and doing playlist will help you view which asset is unassigned. And then you use this little mini checkbox right here to check which assets you want to combine into your playlist for the day. And then you hit link selected. And that's how you do that. Um, so yeah, hopefully again, this is recorded and this presentation will be given to you, but hopefully that explanation made sense. It's really easy when you're in ShotGrid. You'll see exactly, like, it's really easy to get the hang of. Okay. And then of course your crew, it's the list of everyone who has access to that product. It's another tab that tells you who's all in the ShotGrid, essentially. Pretty straightforward there. Um, you can also download files from ShotGrid. And the way you do that, well, one way you do that is you click on the specific version you want to download. So, for example, you want to download this UV right here. And then you go to version info the underneath that version and it's the link next to uploaded movie. Like it's just one when you click on it, it automatically download, but it's like a really roundabout way of doing that. I think we have another way of doing that. Yes, we have another way. But first, Diana, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I joined a little bit late, so I hope you didn't already cover this. But in the dailies, I was curious if there was a way to link to the individual person that uploaded something in the reviews. Like within the dailies, everybody uploads their work. Is there a way to find a link to the individual submissions, like by person? Does that make sense? Like, so I would have a
Yeah,
link to that from anywhere?
I believe there is a way to do that. If you go on the crew tab and you click the person selected, I believe
Mm.
that's a way to view all of the assets the person has uploaded into the shot grid. Um, And then another way of doing that as well is like when you upload when you gather together all of the versions you want to look at for a dailies class, it'll
Yeah.
also say who uploaded that asset attached to it. And when you give them any draw over and save that, it'll send to their inbox the fact that there was a change made to
Yeah,
like
because like I asked them to send me the link to their, uploaded work on dailies, but every link that I've gotten, I noticed is just to dailies in general. So I was just curious if you could be like one level more specific to the individual uploads. But it sounds like it's maybe going through crews, not you can't really do it through dailies directly.
Yeah, it like
Okay.
because the playlists allow you to gather together versions,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I don't believe there's a way to be more specific in terms of like the person. I mean,
Okay.
it'll say in the playlist who uploaded what,
Right.
um,
Mhm.
but in terms of that level of specificity, I don't believe there's a way to do
Okay. Yeah,
that.
I was just curious if you could be that specific. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. No, that was a great question. Okay. But this is one way of downloading files from ShotGrid. Another way of downloading files from ShotGrid is to it's to view, of course, pull up the version you want to download, um, and then click this small little gear in the bottom right corner, and then you hit View Source File, and it should create a new tab, and then you right click and save as to download from there as well. So as you can see, Chakra does not have a super straightforward way of you downloading things off of it. But it is possible through these methods. Before I move forward, I know Diana had a question, but does anyone else have a question thus far? I know this has been a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about anything? Also, feel free to put it in chat if you do. Okay, cool. I'll keep moving on, but if someone has a question they want to type out, please feel free to pop that in there. Um, and I'd be more than happy to answer anything as we go. So, a break in the presentation, we're moving on to a new topic, how to customize your project. So this is something that has to deal more so with your manager role and being able to shuffle things around on the back end. This is like we're gonna talk a little bit more about customizing your Shotgrid to what your pipeline needs. So we're going to talk again about entity bricks, like what I mentioned very briefly at the beginning of the presentation. Um, so this is essentially entity bricks is a really fancy name for a tab. It's a tab. It's you deciding what tabs will be on the project menu bar, essentially. Um, but when you're looking at the project menu bar, which again, it's not that very top bar at the very top of Shotgrid, it's that one just below it. Um, you click on project actions and then hit the navigation button. And that's where you find the entity brick adjustment options. So the active entity bricks will be up here at the very top, and you'll see like these little things right next to the names of the bricks that allows you to shuffle them around and reorder them if you want to. But the inactive entity bricks are below that down here that you can add or take away to your project bar menu. I would recommend trying to keep your entity bricks pretty straightforward and clear cut, as clear and concise as you can, because the more tabs you add to your project menu bar, the more confusing it'll be for your crew to try and navigate. So just try to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible for what your project needs. And then setting up assets and shots. So from here, say you want to make um say you want to get further into the weeds of like your assets and shots. One way of doing that is to create pipeline steps. And this is for any assets that go into your shot grid. And we're getting very much into the weeds of like things that things that Autodesk made up to sound fancy, but they're really not. So um, let's see. Sure, entity pipeline assets asset. So essentially what a pipeline step is it's a way to label a certain step in the process of what your assets is in the grand scheme of things. And it's best to create new pipeline steps that only apply to your project specifically so that other projects can't mess with your customization from a generic template. And what that means is the way that Autodesk sets up for SCAD students their pipeline steps is that it assumes you want to look at every single pipeline step from every single ShotGrid project that has been set up ever at SCAD, which is not helpful. So make sure to create custom pipeline steps labeled to your production specifically. So that you have your own, it's not going to get mixed up with anybody else's project, and you're not going to step on any other project's toes either. Um, so pipeline sets for an asset will look different for 2D, 3D, hybrid, stop motion, or any other film with a unique pipeline. Like, for example, if you're doing a 3D film, you're going to need rigs done. Well, you know, like a 2D film may need rigs done if you're doing puppeting, but if you're doing hand-drawn animation, obviously that's not a step you need to consider. So it's things like that. Like it'll be different for every project for what type of pipeline assets you need to set up. And pipeline steps will typically mirror the type of task created within an asset. So if it's a concept of any kind, if it's a model, UV, texture, rig, that kind of thing. and you can assign different colors to each pipeline step. Um, and just for chronology, visual chronology's sake, I would recommend going in rainbow order because it makes it easier to see the upstream and downstream dependencies that way, and see the visual trickle down of what each asset will lead into the final assets and film being made. Um, so this is for assets specifically, setting up pipeline steps for assets. And when you go to add a pipeline step, make sure that when you're doing it for an asset, it's set to asset at the top when you do that. And then for shots, this is slightly different, but you don't create pipeline steps for shots until you have a locked animatic. You need to make sure that your story is absolutely nailed down before you start making pipeline steps for shots, and create new pipeline steps within the entity type as shots. So again, make sure this button is set to shot, not asset. And you'll need things here such as layout, lighting, compositing, that kind of thing. And again, a new term that Autodesk made up to sound fancy, but it's really not. So task templates. So whenever you're creating tasks for a shot or an asset, you'll most likely copy the same list of tasks to all other shots or a similar type of asset. So to make sure that you're not sitting there for each type of shot task or asset task, sitting there being like, we need to do all of these steps and typing that out for every single one. Creating a task template will save you a ton of time. So make sure to name your task template with the title of your project and specify if it's a shot, or the type of asset, so you can easily search for it. So yeah, just make sure that it's a shot or an asset type, if that makes sense. Um, you can link a pipeline step, a start and end date, a duration, and an upstream and downstream dependency to a task. And so that makes it, again, much more easy for you. Like it'll all meld together in the end to where once you have a lot of things set up, when you first start, it'll trickle down into everything else becoming like quite a bit more like Shotgrid just being like, oh, you mean this, right? And filling everything else out for you, which is really nice. But be sure to specify the entity type as asset or shot, yeah, like I was, yeah, just saying. And then fill sort order to keep tasks in order of pipeline steps. So that's this checkbox right here. So essentially the sort order is like telling Shotgrid this is the order of each step for a certain task that needs to be done. Um, and this will help with your upstream and downstream dependencies and organizing your Gantt charts correctly when Shotgrid automatically makes all of that for you. And then finally, setting all of this up using Shotgrid as a production manager for your production to make life easier for you and so that you can see how your production is doing, where you're at, where you need to be, if you need to be going faster, if you're ahead of schedule, that kind of thing. So when you set up your Gantt charts over here, you can also set up production phases in your Gantt chart. And production phases are pre-production, production, and post-production. And even on our film, we also added in a winter break phase as well, since that's such a long chunk of time. And for our crew, we needed to work over winter in order to stay on schedule. So if that's something your crew needs as well, I would recommend adding in a fourth phase for that as well. And you can add phases to your project schedule by going to other tab and phases. Yes. It doesn't show it here, but that's the steps that you take for that. And then the end of a phase can be a major deadline, i.e. when deliverables are due to be submitted to the department. So like if you want for fall quarter for pre-production to end at like I think I forget when y'all's deadline is for that, but it's like when y'all's proof of concept and your fall poster and your all of those assets are due. I would recommend setting it up to where that phase ends at that point, so that you have a clear idea of like, okay, pretty much that's when pre-production needs to be wrapped up. Um, and it's also a useful visual on the big old Gantt chart. Like these two orange bars, that's the fall phase. And then these two dark blue bars are winter phase. That light blue extended into that way is actual winter quarter phase, that kind of thing. And then for recommendations, let's see, beginning to end of fall quarter, beginning to end of fall quarter, beginning to end of winter quarter, beginning of spring quarter to spring week 7. Yeah. So um essentially just making sure that the logic of when those phases end best works for you and your crew and when things need to get done. Um and then assigning tasks. So you have all of your tasks set up on Shotgrid. And you're like, okay, now people need to work on them. And people need to be assigned to certain things to get done on them. So the way to do that is you assign tasks through an asset, a specific asset, or a sequence. For example, down here, this is an asset for a character that was in Ultramarine called Gamzol. He's a cute little cat. Um, but he needed a lot of different steps done for him. So you that's one way of assigning a task is like by going to him and being like, okay, he needs a model, for example. Let's click next to model in this column right here and type in the name of the person who needs to work on that model. And then when you do that, it automatically sends a notification to that artist's inbox to let them know, hey, you've been assigned to work on that asset, which is really nice. So when you type in something for someone to be done, it shows up as a notification in their inbox and under my tasks as a task for them to complete. Um, let's see. Yes. But make sure that when you type in the artist name, it's the correct name. I know that sounds silly, but it depends. Sometimes the your crew might show up in Shotgrid as like their legal name. Or sometimes even unfortunately, like if someone has a dead name, that's what it shows up as. So like just make sure that it's being assigned to the name that it's in Shotgrid as for that artist. Because if not, it won't show up as a task for them to complete. It like Shotgrid is very picky about like it wants that very specific person's name, how it shows up in the system. Okay. And then version notes. So that's what ShotGrid calls like giving notes on an asset or a project. You would use this during dailies to give feedback on something that an artist has uploaded to the ShotGrid. However, when you do a draw over, because there is a draw over function in ShotGrid, you must submit a written note in this sidebar along with it to save the drawing. Your drawing will delete itself if you don't do that. Why that is, I don't know, but just make sure that if you do any form of draw over, just like submit some kind of comment with it so that it saves. And for statuses, this is how ShotGrid will know if you are ahead of schedule, if you're behind schedule, if you're on time. This is how you let ShotGrid know, okay, this is being assigned. This task is being assigned, or this task has been completed, that kind of thing. So be sure to update statuses regularly to maintain an accurate schedule page and so that your ShotGrid doesn't show up like just straight red down the line when you open up the schedule tab. It'll help you in the long run to keep on top of that and make sure that like as an artist is like, okay, I submitted this. And the director's like, yeah, this is great. This is the final asset. And then you change in ShotGrid for it to be the final button, which is this little gray dot. Um, then that way ShotGrid's like, okay, perfect. I'll update the Gantt chart to where well, it won't the Gantt chart will not update unless you change the duration of a task. but it will be green when you finally finish something. Like it'll highlight that task green. Let's see. And then if an artist uploads an incorrect file, to solve that problem, you go to the versions tab right here, and then you right click on the version you want and click send selected version to trash down here. Um, Another way to do that is to go to the asset tab under versions and right click on the version you want to delete and then hit send selected versions to trash. So if someone uploads something wrong, it's not the end of the world, but they won't be able to delete it. You're the person who has to delete it because of the permissions. Um, which is, it's just how Shotgrid rolls on that front. So you have the power to delete things, but the people on the project do not. So just make sure also if someone on your crew submits an asset incorrectly, that just let them know like, hey, if you do, that's okay, but like just make sure to specify which one is the correct one when you upload the correct one. Like maybe they can go into version notes or something on this sidebar and they can type in on the sidebar like, hey, this is the right version, something like that. Um Something to that effect. And then if an artist forgets their password, so go to the people tab and search for the artist in question and scroll down to login and check for restrictions. And if there are none, you can reset the password for them. However, I would recommend really working with your professor and the person on your crew involved if this ever were to happen. Like there there needs to be like a lot of people sitting down to make sure that like that is done correctly. But that is a power that a manager on a shockwave project can do. And then another little break. Any questions about anything so far as well from what I have talked about thus far with Shotgrid? Okay. Again, feel free to type anything in the chat for now, but I'll keep chugging them. So using Shotgrid on the artist end of things for anyone on your crew who doesn't have manager permissions. So for them uploading versions, the easiest way to do that is again through my tasks in the master menu bar. So they would find the task they want to upload a version to and right click it and then click new version. And in that version file, this is what's going to pop up for them when they go to upload a version. So they would upload any assets they would want to upload to the Shotgrid right here in this drag and drop files here area. And then if they have any message they want to attach to their upload, they would put it in description. Another helpful way of using description is if an artist is sick and can't make it to class, but they're uploading stuff for you to look at in dailies, I would recommend them putting in the description like an explanation for what they did so that you get extra context for what the asset is and what they want you to look at for it. And then let's see, make sure that the task is associated with the correct one they're uploading their asset to. So just double checking as well. And then project, let's see, it should always be the project you're working under, but that's a good thing to double check as well if you're in multiple Shotgrids. Okay. And then closing thoughts, wrapping all of this up. So as a reminder, a positive affirmation. Shotgrid isn't super user friendly. There is a learning curve, but be sure your crew is willing to learn and that you are prepared to teach them. It will take a little bit of time, but I promise it like once you get the hang of it, it's a very flexible program. There's a lot you can do with it. Um, and it allows for a lot of project planning that is maybe not possible with other programs that we learn up until the point of capstone at SCAD. And there's no right way to set up a Shotgrid. Different projects will call for different setups depending on the pipeline. So every project will look different too. So it depends on the medium that your project is. It depends on how long your project is. It depends on how asset your project Um, APG is also here to help. Don't forget that, like, subtle plug. Oh, hold on. My internet connection is unstable, so please let me know if I'm cutting out. Um, at any point. But APG is here to help. Don't forget APG is a resource for y'all if you ever need it. Subtle plug. But some resources, some extra resources for y'all in case you ever need more help setting up Shotgrid, because I know for me it took quite a while to get the hang of it. This is the most important thing that I will I'm gonna copy this. Hold on, copy link address. I'm gonna put it in the chat right now. This is the most important video you will watch in setting up your ShotGrid as well. I know I gave like a full rundown of how ShotGrid works, but for me, this is what helped me set mine up for Ultramarine. Please give this a watch. This is Jillian McDermott's tutorial. She is a previous APG president, but she also produced Goro Goro, if you happen to be familiar with that film. That SCAD film. Uh, it's a step-by-step tutorial as well on how to set everything up from start to finish, and she screen records as she sets up a test shot grid. It's extremely helpful. Highly, highly, highly recommend you watch that as well if you walk out of this still needing help, which I totally understand if you do. Like I've said multiple times, shot grid is not user-friendly. But another super helpful tutorial, previous co-president of APG as well, Morgan Ang, she also set up a YouTube tutorial on using ShotGrid on the artist end of things. So if you want a video to share with your crew on how to use ShotGrid, this is a helpful resource as well, so that they can get on board with ShotGrid as well and understand how to use it on their end. Previous APG officer DJ Price and friend of the club Allison Stribnick have made comprehensive guides on ShotGrid as well, that they have shared with us. And these are. Do you have a link to the Discord channel? Yes, I can share it at the end of the presentation, which is in like a couple minutes now, I promise. We're reaching the end, fellas. Um, but these two are very, very helpful PDFs that also explain how ShotGrid works, what certain terminology is, how they have approached setting up their ShotGrids from years past. Uh, one more time, any questions about anything that I have talked about today, and then I can share the link to the APG Discord for folks interested in staying connected to APG. Okay, cool. In that case, I'm going to stop sharing and then send the link to that. But I also want to make clear that, like, I'm a resource as well. If you reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to help you with anything ShotGrid related. Yeah, no problem. No problem, Diana. But like I would be more than happy to help you with anything you need for ShotGrid. Let me see. I am Plant Cell on Discord. Um of APG's account right now, which is why if you see that my name is Caitlin Westermeyer, that's why that is. But my name is Grace. And let's see, I am pulling up APG right now. No, no, no. Invite people, copy, and paste. But this recording and the presentation from today will be on the APG Discord. And if you ever need help with anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm a current grad student, so I'm still at SCAD. I'd be more than happy to help y'all with your shot grids if you need it. But if no one else has any other questions, that's all I have for y'all today. And I hope y'all I hope y'all learned something. I hope everything made sense. And I wish y'all the best on your capstone productions. I'm so excited to see y'all's films at the end of the year. Yeah, no problem, y'all. Glad y'all can make it.